Hey guys, welcome to the video. I have a question for you. Do you have a Sony A6000 but you want to buy a specific lens, and by that I mean the 30mm 1.4 from Sigma or the 30mm 2.8 also from Sigma? Well, in this video I will break down the main differences for both lenses so that it can actually help you make up your mind whenever you decide which lens you want to choose. Well, I'm going to be listing the main differences between both of those lenses in this video right after the intro. Hi guys, this is Carl from Tech and Pics, and welcome to the video. And basically this channel is about tech and it is about pics, but most importantly it's about taking pics. And you can't take pics unless you have a fantastic lens, and today we are comparing two really great lenses. One you probably wouldn't expect, and the other one actually, well, a lot of people would expect because it's one of the most recent lenses that are on that have actually come onto the market as of recent. So the first lens we are comparing today is the Sigma DCDN 30mm 1.4, and this is all for the Sony native E-mount and not for the Micro Four Thirds. And the second lens is the Sigma EXDN 30mm 2.8. As far as the Sigma 30mm 1.4 is concerned, it is much bigger in size. I would compare the actual EXDN 30mm 2.8 to the same size as about the Sony 35mm 1.8. So there is a substantial size difference, but it's not that much that would actually change your mind. The problem here is that the weight is substantially different. The 30mm 1.4 is almost 200 grams heavier than the EXDN 30mm 2.8, which is really saying a lot. Now the actual EXDN model I'm reviewing today is the first one, which is made mostly from plastic, so it was even the lighter one. Now regarding image quality, well, the image quality on both lenses are actually amazing. Of course, the 1.4 version is amazing. At 1.4, it does not lose a lot of contrast, but it does have some minor signs of chromatic aberration and purple fringing, but just a tiny hint. It's not even that much to actually worry about. And it is beautiful at 1.4, and it actually captures a lot of detail in low light situations, which is a big plus if you're looking for that kind of thing. Now, the 30mm 2.8 EXDN is actually no slouch either. It captures fantastic quality and is actually sharp from edge to edge, as well as the 30mm 1.4 when comparing both at 2.8. Now the reason I'm comparing both at 2.8 is because, well, the EXDN 30mm 2.8 starts at 2.8 wide open, while as the other one starts at 1.4. But to actually have a better understanding about the difference in quality for both, I am now going to get into a more detailed look at the raw files from both at 1.4 and at 2.8 for both of them, so that you can see that there is a substantial difference in quality, and actually there are some results which might surprise you. So let's jump into that now.
Now the picture on the left is the Sigma 30mm 1.4 and the picture on the right is the Sigma 30mm 2.8. Now let's start directly from the center. Now I'm starting at 2.8 because basically I want to put them both on the same level, the same playing field. And as you can see in the middle, both lenses look very sharp. Really, it's really an outstanding, it's an outstanding testament. If you really want to pinpoint, you can actually see that on the left, which is the 1.4 30mm, there is some slight fringing, purple fringing, it's really very slight. And you see that here there's a little bit more contrast in the 30mm 2.8. Now that is actually a good thing for this little tiny plastic lens, which really costs nothing. Let's go up to the corners, and as you can see in the corners, of course it seems like the Sigma 30mm 1.4 is in fact brighter. That probably has a little bit less vignetting at 2.8, but as you can see that the Sigma 30mm 2.8 is really sharp in the corners. It loses no sharpness into the corners. It's literally from edge to edge sharpness, and it really looks like the 30mm 1.4. It falls apart ever so slightly. Look at the handlebar right there. You can see that it's a little blurry there, and you can see that here it maintains actually every tiny bit of sharpness. You can also tell the detail in the stones here. Here there's less detail, and here there's a lot more detail. That's outstanding. And to keep in mind is that the price difference on both lenses is really a lot. You can get the Sigma 30mm 2.8. You can even find it for as little as $100, which is what I paid for my version, about $80 to $100. I don't remember on the euro to dollar conversion. And the 30mm 1.4, I paid like $300 for it because I bought it like as soon as it first came out. If we come down to the other edge here, we can take a look in this window here with the light on. You can see, if you really want to pinpoint, there seems to be actually a little bit less detail and a little bit less contrast in the line of the table there and the printer. And onto the 2.8 version, 30mm 2.8, you can see there's a lot more detail and contrast. Even though the corner looks a little bit darker, you're going to have ever so slightly a little bit of vignetting, but this can be corrected in post-production. Going into the other into the other corner, you can clearly see here that it's the same thing. The 30mm 2.8 is truly, EXDN is truly an outstanding lens, and really it should not be overlooked for any reason, because the proof is in the pudding. You can see that it's actually sharper in the corners, both at 2.8 than both lenses. Look at that. You can see the detail. There's much more detail. Now, of course, I'm really pixel peeping here, but if you don't pixel peep and this is good enough for you, then honestly, both lenses are actually fine if you really wanted that extra 1.4 f-stop. Now, jumping over to what the 30mm 1.4 was actually designed for, I am now testing on the right side the 30mm 2.8 with the 30mm 1.4 at 1.4, and you can see that I shouldn't even be making this kind of contest, because the 30mm 1.4 at 1.4, while it does have a lot of detail, and it actually, with respect to other 1.4 lenses in the same price category, in the same price point and category, it actually retains a lot of contrast and sharpness at 1.4. It's really an outstanding lens, but you can see here that the lens, of course, at 1.4, it's not as sharp as the 2.8 at 2.8. This is normal. This is completely normal, but it's just the fact that you get this extra few stops of light that you can make that nice bokeh blurry background. And as you can see, there's also a little bit more distortion in the corners with the 30mm 1.4 at 1.4 compared to the 2.8 at 2.8. Now, of course, in the corners, as I said before, you can see there's a little bit of, you can see the purple fringing right there. It's very little. It's very, very slight. They really designed the 30mm 1.4 to be outstanding performer at 1.4, which is exactly what it does fantastically. You're not going to get the same results, of course, and honestly, regarding sharpness in picture, I would actually give the edge to the 30mm 2.8. The only reason why in this case I would pick the 30mm 1.4 over the 2.8 is actually because of the extra stops of light and the sharpness at 1.4, but that's about it.
Now, as you can see from that detailed review, that there is actually a lot of surprises when it comes to the image quality in both lenses. Now, getting on to the next part is actually my favorite part, because for me, an autofocus lens that does not perform very well is not really that good of a lens to begin with, because the whole point that I get an autofocus lens is that it works correctly almost 99%, at least 99% of the time. And the EXDN 30mm 2.8 performs wonderfully when it comes to autofocusing. It is really fast, it is really precise, and on top of that, the manual focusing is actually very, very well responsive, which is a huge plus because you can compare it to the Sony native lenses in terms of autofocusing and manual focusing. Now, regarding the DCDN 30mm 1.4, I've reviewed this lens in depth, and you can find the link right here, and the autofocusing speed on the DCDN 30mm 1.4, especially at 1.4, is, well, it's not really that good. A lot of times it actually loses focus, and it actually focuses on things that are behind the actual subject. And I talk about this in actual great detail in the video review. I would give the edge as far as the autofocusing and the manual focusing to the EXDN 30mm 2.8. Another thing to keep in mind is that the DCDN 30mm 1.4 has horrible manual focusing capabilities, because you have to turn it a lot for it to actually make any movement. And of course, I also get into this in detail in the video review, which I've posted the link before. Now, on to the next part, and that is the color. And while both lenses are pretty much the same in terms of color, the Sigma has this signature cold look to the colors. So if you're looking for great colors, you can probably set it on your camera in JPEG. You can probably set it to vivid. to a vivid profile, or if you're shooting in RAW, you can modify the pictures in Lightroom. Now, one last point to make in both lenses, and this actually isn't that much of a point because they can be easily corrected in Lightroom, is that the Sigma DCDN 30mm 1.4 does have more distortion than the EXDN 30mm 2.8. But of course, these are both easily corrected in Lightroom afterwards whenever you import your pictures into the program. So now that I've actually broken down the most important parts of both lenses, which one would I actually choose? Well, I'd have to put both lenses on pretty much the same level, because while the 30mm 2.8 has wonderful autofocusing and it is actually sharp, it's small and light, the 30mm 1.4 has amazing image quality when it actually does focus correctly. And even in video mode, a lot of times, like I'm using it right now to record this video, when you stand perfectly still and nothing is moving behind you, the picture quality is amazing and it gives off a large amount of lines of resolution, and it is an amazing lens when it comes to picture quality. Plus the fact that it can shoot at 1.4 is really good whenever you're in those low light situations, that it can give you amazing picture quality even wide open. So in terms of image quality, I would go for the 30mm 1.4. In terms of performance and very good image quality, but not better than the 30mm 1.4, I'd go for the 30mm 2.8. Now, down to the last point, which is the price for both. Now, you can find the EXDN 30mm 2.8 on Amazon, the newer version, for less than $200. And this is an important factor because you are not buying a horrible lens. You are not even buying a good lens. You're buying a fantastic lens, because I still think that the 30mm 2.8 is a great lens. It's actually sharper than Sony's own 35mm 1.8. Sigma has a way to make the image quality of their lenses extraordinary. That's why it is really so difficult to choose one out of both of them. But if you are buying in terms of budget, in terms of price, if you don't need those extra few stops of light to shoot in low light capability, or you are not looking for over-the-top image quality, then I would definitely say get the AXDN 30mm 2.8. As I said, you can find it for under $200 on Amazon if you wanted to buy it brand new, the newer version, whereas the DCDN 30mm 1.4 is usually on sale for anywhere from $250 to $300. So if you are on a budget but you want to get a lens which actually performs on the same level, if you would stack the pros and the cons of both, it's on the same level as the DCDN 30mm 1.4, then by all means get the EXDN 30mm 2.8. You will definitely not be disappointed. Now guys, that is it for me, and thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you enjoy these videos, and check out my social media links, direct link in the description below. And guys, thank you for watching.